Hello, my name is Robert Melso. We're filming from the Pro-Liberty Forum, an organization dedicated to learning about American history. You can visit us at the prolibertyforum.com. That's prolibertyforum.com, where you'll find useful insights regarding America's founding and history. This is the second in a series of interviews with Dr. Tom Giordano. The book is UnaLIENable: What It Really Means and Why It Matters. In our last interview, Dr. Thomas Giordano was telling us about the word, and I want to dive in today a little bit more about that and understand the meaning of the word and why it's changed. Dr. Thomas Giordano, can you go a little bit into the etymology of the word and why it changed and why that matters?
Yes, I believe the word first appears in approximately 1510 in French literature, more appropriately French legal literature. The word alien in French means to aliene in English. It's same word brought to the British Isles, but they pronounced it differently, aliene rather than alien. The word has its origin in Latin, from the Latin legere, which means to bind physically. Now, basically, these were terms that were used for commercial purposes. An alienment, some monetary claim on a property or a person or a deed or something like that. So it was a legal term that meant the transfer or subjectability of commerce to a certain thing, and that's where the word came from. And that meaning was the meaning that the founding fathers would have understood.
Okay, let me stop you there for a minute if I could.
Okay.
Merriam Dictionary definition: not able to be taken away.
Wow.
Our definition is different. What is that definition and why does it really matter?
Well, it matters a lot. It's not a question of, it's not just a question of semantics. The word that the founding fathers would have understood and would have pronounced would have been unalienable, not subject to commerce, non-transferable. The concept, there was a secondary meaning using alien as the root word rather than lien. Now, at that particular time, the English language was really not that standardized. Neither was its spelling. As a matter of fact, Ben Franklin did a lot to standardize the spelling of American English. But the word unalienable, it's written the same, but it's not pronounced the same. The meaning in our American dictionaries started to change from non-transferable, not subject to commerce, to cannot be taken away in the approximately 1910 to 1912, in that area, during the progressive administrations of Teddy Roosevelt and Woodrow Wilson.
Okay, so what is the implication of that? Why would it change? And what does it mean to us in our daily lives? Why do we worry about that?
Well, the sentence in the Declaration of Independence was that we are endowed, we hold these truths to be self-evident. We are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, what they were saying there was that these rights were not subject to transfer. They could not be transferred to a government for which we would have to pay in order to get them back. Think of licensure. It would be like someone, giving away their rights to an authority to then pay to have those rights back.
This change in the meaning allowed government, or those who would want to change that meaning, allowed them a foothold into abrogating our rights.
Absolutely. Because if your argument is unalienable means can't be taken away, well, that's a specious argument. Of course your rights can be taken away. Get arrested for a crime. You are paying society by giving up your rights for a certain amount of time, or by giving up your life because you've taken somebody else's life. It is a quid pro quo. It is a commensurate payment in your rights being deprived from you for having deprived the rights of someone else or society or whatever law was violated. But the fact of the matter is that if your argument is that these are unalienable rights, these are unalienable rights, they can't be taken away, anybody could throw a stone at that. Anybody could use that as a straw man argumentation to say, hey, wait a minute, your rights can be taken away. The objective is a very nefarious objective, because what they're doing is they're taking away your unalienable God-given rights and saying that you don't have these things. You only have rights that are privileges or entitlements granted by a higher authority. And that higher authority is what? The government. Back then it was the king. But now, you know, what happens is that it allows these people in power to take away your rights and then make them reappear as privileges.
Okay, let me get to this topic. In the book, you have your quote in here. He who controls the schools controls the grammar. He who controls the grammar controls the discourse. Is that what you're alluding to?
Yes, exactly. There are basically two different types of governments in the world. One where the people control the government, and one where the government controls the people. Our government was created based upon that concept of unalienability. We created an entirely new form of government, but the government was created to serve us. We were not there to serve it.
Okay, so I want to ask you a question. It seems to me that we've become somewhat unmoored from our standard view of what government should do and shouldn't do.
Right, exactly.
We've become divorced from the idea of the Constitution. Things happen every day that gives us pause. How can restoring the real meaning of this word, unalienable, help cure that?
Right now, we have a Supreme Court justice who's being questioned in Congress. We have a problem with the Supreme Court in that what we would call a conservative justice is a justice who is convinced that our country is based upon the rule of law, and that the position of a judge, a justice at the Supreme Court level, is to interpret laws that are coming down the line, whether they are in line with the Constitution, whether they are not violating constitutional principles, such as taking our rights away without our permission. Now, a constructionist, a strict constructionist, their point of view is this: the Constitution of the United States was written in 1789. The words that they used to understand that Constitution were the words of 1789, and the ratification of that document occurred in 1789 and afterwards. If we keep the word and change the definition, we are in effect changing the Constitution without ratification, which means that we are no longer following the document that was ratified. That is the principal meaning of being a constructionist jurist on the Supreme Court. But those same concepts have to be applied to the documents themselves, including the Declaration. You cannot use a 21st century definition of the word unalienable and apply it to the 18th century. Losing that definition loses the meaning of the document.
You know, in the book, you've taken, I think, great care not to make this a textbook. It's actually very readable. Anybody with a 5th or 6th grade education could easily read this. It's mostly a collection of short stories about you having conversations with your father. Why did you write it that way? You're obviously a very scholarly person. Why didn't you just write a textbook?
We need another textbook? People don't relate to textbooks. Textbooks are very dry. These were concepts that I learned along the way, not in school. My father taught me. They were life lessons, starting at the age of 8 or 9. And he taught me specific things on how this concept of unalienability applied to every aspect of our life. It was the bedrock foundation of our concept of what it was to be an American, as it applies to economics, as it applies to government, as it applies to interpreting our liberties and where they come from. It is what made our country and what makes our country the greatest human experiment ever conceived by man. The interesting thing is that I wanted to do this in a way that not only showed the way I learned these concepts, but the methodology that my father used to instruct me in these concepts. It wasn't like he would just say, hey, no, Tommy, this is the meaning and this is what they meant. And so go eat a cupcake. That wasn't the way it was. My father guided me by asking me simple questions, giving me the dictionary and say, look the word up, define all the words in the definition that you don't understand, never pass a word or a phrase that you do not understand fully, and you will be able to understand what critical analysis is to understanding the concepts of what we were all about. Our educational system came out of Prussia, came out of Germany in the 1800s, so mid-1800s. The Prussian institutions were based on a concept that in German it's said, Wiederholen ist die Mutter des Lernen. And what this means is that repetition is the mother of learning. That's what it means in English. Now, you go further on to the Russian Revolution in 1917, and with the birth of Nazism in Germany, you had propaganda arms. The propaganda arms, if you were to ask Goebbels, what would he say? If you say a lie loud enough and often enough, people will begin to believe it's true. The same thing that Beria said, very same thing that Beria said in Russia.
So you're saying that our kids are being lied to?
Yeah, absolutely. And if they're not being lied to intentionally by their teachers, because I don't even think the teachers understand this, they are unintentionally misinformed or ill-informed. Our educational system was basically created to create good citizens, good thinking citizens. That's what the purpose of our educational system was. There was another purpose too. It was to convert Roman Catholics to Protestantism. But that being aside, the purpose of the education was basically to create a good thinking citizen to become an asset to society. That's been lost. They come out of school hating our society. They come out of school questioning the wisdom of the founding fathers. They come out of school telling us that we should give up the 3,500-year history of the Bible and supplant it with Das Kapital, or the Communist Manifesto of Karl Marx. Well, if I'm gonna follow a principle of life, I'm not going to follow a principle of life that was created by somebody who goes to the bathroom the same way I do.
You talk a little bit about democracy in here.
Yes.
And you quote Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson called it despotism. Why is that?
Majority rule is always despotic, because the majority can vote in through a democratic process a tyranny. They could vote to trample your rights. The best way to describe it is two wolves and a sheep voting for what's for dinner tonight. But what the wolves don't understand is once they eat the sheep, what else are they going to eat? We'd all be drinking hemlock, my buddy. We'd all be drinking hemlock if we followed the whims of the masses. My father used to tell me something interesting. There was an expression that was 50,000 Frenchmen can be wrong and usually are. And he was right. But our country was not supposed to be dependent on mob rule or an individual. Our country was supposed to be based upon the rule of law. And the Constitution was written to tried to curtail immoral human aspirations.
So you're basically saying that the individual was the primary and not the majority.
That's absolutely correct. The smallest minority in the United States is the individual. And all of the rights, all of the protections, everything that is done for the individual. Today, they have identity politics. They're going to put you in a classification. This is typical Hegelian, typical Marxist crap, all right? Let's put it frankly. It's typical Marxist crap. They create two groups, pit them off against each other for positive rights. So once they get the votes, they vote to take away from you to give to Joey 2 slices of pizza over there. That's what it all comes down to.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Our second interview. The book is UnaLIENable, what it really means and why it matters. And I hope you'll read it. It's coming out on Amazon on the 25th of October. And we will see you next time, Doctor. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.